You think that's funny? The woman sneered, diamonds glinting under the chandelier. Another ice cube landed near Amelia's feet. A puddle formed, mirroring the hollowness in her stomach. Fired. Done. Liam's medicine? Unthinkable. Everyone watched, their silence a thick shroud. But here's the thing. They didn't know about the locket tucked under Amelia's uniform, the dented silver oval she always wore, the one bearing the V. Not just a trinket, see? A legacy. Jaden Blackwood, the owner, the real power in this place, he'd recognize it. A storm was brewing, not of ice, but of something far more transformative. Kindness isn't weakness, and they were about to learn that the hard way. The rich woman smirks, ready to have the girl fired. But then he appears, the owner, Jaden Blackwood, a man who controls empires from his penthouse office. He walks past the rich woman, past the trembling manager, and stops in front of the dripping waitress. And then, in a move that shatters the silence, the billionaire falls to one knee. What secret does this poor girl hold that could bring a king to his knees? The air inside Lee Waldor was different. It felt thinner, cleaner, and smelled faintly of aged citrus and old money. For Amelia Vance, 24 years old and perpetually behind on rent, breathing it in felt like a privilege she hadn't earned. Le Waldor wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of status on the Upper East Side, a place where whispered conversations could launch a company or sink a political campaign. The plates were Valois and Beau, the cutlery was crystal silver, and the markup on the wine was, by Amelia's calculations, roughly equivalent to her brother's monthly medical expenses. Amelia was new, desperately, transparently new. She'd gotten the job through a mix of sheer luck and a steely desperation that Matteo Rossi, the restaurant's formidable maitre, had mistaken for professional poise. Amelia was a quick study. She learned to carry the heavy silver trays balanced perfectly on one palm, her arm aching. She learned to memorize which guests preferred their sparkling water with a lime twist versus a lemon wedge. She learned to become invisible, a silent poltergeist in a crisp black uniform, there to anticipate a need before it fully formed in a guest's mind. Her life outside these gilded walls was a stark, brutalist contrast. She lived in a fourth-floor walk-up in the less fashionable part of Brooklyn, a small apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that clanged like a warning bell. The apartment's only real warmth came from her 16-year-old brother, Liam. Liam was her world. He was bright and sarcastic, a budding artist who sketched superheroes in the margins of his textbooks. He also had a rare autoimmune disorder that required a cocktail of medications so expensive they seemed fictional. Amelia's paycheck from her morning barista job barely covered their groceries. Let Door, with its promise of tips from billionaires, was their only hope. Vance Matteo Rossi snapped his voice a low hiss that cut through the kitchen's symphony of clanging pans. Table 7, Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes. She's particular. Do not make eye contact unless she addresses you, and do not speak unless spoken to. Refill her water, San Pellegrino. 75 Pime Lost. No ice, 1 slice of lime, not lemon. Before she has to ask, go. Amelia nodded, her throat tight. She'd heard of Beatrice Vanderbilt Hayes. The staff spoke of her in the same way sailors might speak of a treacherous reef. She approached the table, her silver tray held high. Table 7 was the restaurant's prime real estate, a plush velvet booth overlooking the small private garden. Beatrice, draped in a blood-red dress and enough diamonds to signal a ship, was holding court with 3 other women who looked like polished, expensive variations of herself. And then Arthur just bought the gallery, Beatrice was saying, her laugh like tinkling, broken glass. He said, "Darling, why buy the painting when you can own the wall?" Amelia moved with practiced silence. She reached for the empty water glass. "Excuse me." Amelia froze. The voice was sharp, cold. Beatrice Vanderbilt Hayes turned her head slowly, her heavily mascaraed eyes raking over Amelia. It wasn't a glance. It was an assessment, an appraisal of livestock. "What is your name?" Beatrice asked. "Amelia, Mom." "Amelia," Beatrice repeated, tasting the name and clearly finding it bland. "You're new, I can tell. You have that frightened look. It's unprofessional. Don't hover. Just do your job. Yes, Mom. I was just refilling You were interrupting. Beatrice snapped, turning back to her friends. Anyway, as I was saying, the Hamptons are simply unbearable this time. Amelia retreated, her cheeks burning. She hadn't said a word. She had simply existed too closely to the sun. She busied herself at a nearby service station, polishing cutlery that was already spotless. Her hands shaking slightly, she clutched the simple locket around her neck. A nervous habit. It was her only heirloom, a small dented silver oval her mother had given her. It was old, perhaps Victorian, with a stylized V carved into the front. It was her one piece of continuity, the only thing that connected her to a past she knew nothing about. Later that evening, as she cleared the main course from table 7, Beatrice stopped her again. That necklace, Beatrice said, gesturing with a dismissive, beeringed finger. Is that real? Amelia was stunned by the question. Mom, your necklace, it's quaint. Is it a family piece, or did you find it in a Cracker Jack box? The other women tittered. Amelia felt the familiar heat rise in her face. It was my mother's mom. How sweet, Beatrice said, her smile not reaching her eyes. A little piece of sentiment. Personally, I find sentiment to be a luxury of the poor. It's what they have instead of assets. You can go now, Amelia. Amelia walked back to the kitchen, her jaw set so tightly it ached. She thought of Liam, of the stack of blue-windowed envelopes on their kitchen table. She thought of the $800 useless copay she needed by Friday. She took a deep breath of the expensive citrus-scented air and forced her shoulders back. She would endure. She would be invisible. She would survive Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes. She didn't know that the night was young and Beatrice was only getting started. The next 2 hours were a blur of frenetic, high-stakes service. Le Waldor was operating at its peak, a well-oiled machine of culinary excellence and obsequious service. Amelia ran plates of seared foie gras, decanted bottles of $2,000 Chateau Margaux for tables of hedge fund managers, and smiled until her face felt like a porcelain mask. She avoided table 7, a task made easier as one of the restaurant's senior waiters, a polished man named Luke, took over their main service. Amelia was relegated to water and bread, the lowest rungs of the service ladder. She was grateful for the demotion. But Beatrice Vanderbilt Hayes was not the type of woman to be forgotten or to allow herself to be. She was a black hole of need, demanding the attention of every staff member in her orbit. She sent her Dusol back twice, once because it was pathetically lukewarm, and a second time because the lemon was too assertive. Matteo Rossi, the maître, was a permanent fixture at her tableside, his face a mask of apologetic concern, his spine rigid. Of course, Mrs., says Vanderbilt Hayes. My apologies. We will correct this immediately. Amelia watched the exchange from afar. She saw the flick of Beatrice's wrist, the imperious stare, the undisguised pleasure she took in making a powerful man grovel. It was a performance, and the entire restaurant was her unwilling audience. At 9:30 p.m., the tension peaked. Beatrice signaled for Amelia. Not for Luke, not for Matteo, for Amelia. Amelia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She approached the table. Yes, Mom. My water, Beatrice said, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her glass. The glass was half full. It's been sitting. I can see the air in it. It's flat. I require a fresh glass with fresh ice and a fresh lime. Of course, Mom. Immediately, Amelia retrieved the glass. She went to the service station, her hands moving with precision. She took a chilled crystal tumbler. She used silver tongs to select 3 perfect clear cubes of ice. She poured the San Pelro until it fizzed just below the rim. She added a paper-thin slice of lime. She placed it on a small silver coaster and carried it back. This was the part of the job she hated, the sheer pointless waste. But it was the job. She placed the fresh glass on the table to Beatrice's right. Your fresh water, Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes. Beatrice didn't even look at it. She was in a heated discussion with her friends about a rival's new yacht. Amelia began to retreat, thankful to have escaped. Wait. Amelia turned. Beatrice picked up the new glass of water. She stared at it, her top lip curling in disdain. What is this? It's your water, Mom. This is not what I asked for, Beatrice said, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm sorry, Mom. It's San Pelgro. 3 ice cubes, 1 lime slice. Are you questioning me? Beatrice's eyes flashed. She was enjoying this. This was the climax of her performance. I said I wanted fresh ice. This ice, she poked at a cube with her fingernail, is clearly from the bottom of the bin. It's cloudy. And this lime, it's a wedge, not a slice. Are you blind or just stupid? Amelia looked at the lime. It was a slice. She had cut it herself. Ma'am, I apologize. Let me get you another one. Don't bother, Beatrice said, her voice rising. This entire evening has been one disappointment after another. This place is supposed to be the best, but they're clearly letting in riffraff. She looked directly at Amelia, then at her locket, which had slipped out from under her uniform's collar. People who don't know the difference between quality and this. Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes, please, Amelia said, her voice trembling slightly. She could feel the eyes of the other tables on her. The restaurant's low hum of conversation had faltered. Allow me to fix it. You can't fix it, Beatrice spat. You're the problem. You with your cheap little attitude and your pathetic little necklace. You don't belong here. And then it happened. It wasn't a spill. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, calculated act of malice. Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes picked up the glass of ice water, looked Amelia dead in the eye, and with a flick of her wrist, threw the entire contents at her. The cold hit Amelia like a physical blow. The ice cubes clattered against her chest and fell to the floor, skittering across the marble. The water, shockingly cold, soaked the front of her white shirt, a dark spreading stain of humiliation. It dried down her black apron into her shoes. A drop of water clung to her eyelash. The restaurant went utterly, profoundly silent. The clink of cutlery stopped. The music, a soft classical piano, seemed to vanish. Amelia just stood there dripping, gasping from the cold. Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes placed the empty glass back on the table with a satisfied click. She sat back, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. She had gotten what she wanted. A scene. A victory. Now, Beatrice said to the silent room, get this clumsy thing out of my sight, and someone get me a real drink. Time seemed to freeze. Amelia was trapped in the amber of that moment, the water chilling her skin, the silence of the room deafening her. She could feel dozens of pairs of eyes dissecting her. She saw pity in some, amusement in others, and cold indifference in most. They were diners, and their dinner's entertainment had just arrived. Her training kicked in. Do not engage, do not escalate, apologize. But the words wouldn't come. Her throat was locked, closed by a combination of shock and a white-hot rage that burned beneath the icy water. She had been insulted. She had been mocked. But this was a violation. This was an assault. She started, her voice a ready whisper. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Beatrix taunted, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. Or did the ice freeze it shut? The women at her table giggled, covering their mouths like schoolgirls. Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes, Matteo Rossi, was suddenly there, gliding across the floor like a panther, his face pale with fury. But Amelia couldn't tell at whom. Mr. Rossi, finally, Beatrice sighed, feigning exhaustion. Your waitress just, well, look at this. She fumbled the glass, splashed water all over my table, and now she's just standing there dripping. It's disgusting. I've completely lost my appetite. It was a blatant lie, audacious in its simplicity. Amelia stared, astounded. She threw it at me, Amelia whispered, the words finally breaking free. Matteo's eyes flicked to Amelia, then back to his prized high-spending guest. He made a lightning-fast calculation. Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes and her husband spent, by his estimation, over $200,000 a year at this restaurant and its sister properties. Amelia Vance was a new hire, replaceable, a nobody. Miss Vance, Matteo said, his voice terrifyingly calm and low. You will apologize to Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes for this disturbance, and then you will go to the back immediately. Amelia's head snapped up. Apologize for what? She assaulted me. Amelia, Matteo warned, his eyes like steel. Do not make this worse. Make it worse. Amelia's shock was now giving way to a dangerous, reckless courage. The kind that only comes when you have nothing left to lose. She's lying. You're taking her side. Insolence, Beatrice declared, slamming her hand on the table. Did you hear that, Matteo? She's unhinged. I come here for a peaceful dinner, and I am accosted by your unmanaged hysterical staff. I want her fired. Now in front of me. Matt bottom lip trembling, Amelia looked at Matteo, appealing to the man who had hired her, the man who had complimented her work ethic just yesterday. Mr. Rossi, please. I was just standing here. Matteo visibly winced. He hated this. He hated the scene. He hated Beatrix's cruelty, and he hated the position she had put him in. But the calculus of high-end hospitality was cold and unfilling. The customer, especially this customer, was always right. Emilia, he said, his voice full of a sudden, weary finality, go to my office. Clean yourself up. We will discuss your employment. It was a death sentence. We will discuss your employment, was the polite corporate way of saying you're fired. Tears, hot and angry, finally welled in Amelia's eyes, blurring the faces of the diners. She had failed. She had endured the mockery of her locket, the insults, the 12-hour shifts, all for nothing. Because a rich woman was bored, Amelia was fired. Because a bored woman was cruel, Liam might not get his medication. The injustice of it was a physical weight, heavier than any silver tray. She turned, her soaked shoe squeaking shamefully on the marble. She would not give Beatrice the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She held her head high, her dented silver locket swinging free, damp against her ruined shirt. She took one step, two. Stop. The voice was not Matteo's. It was not a guest's. It was a new voice, one that seemed to command the very air in the room, dropping the temperature by another 10 degrees. It came from the private entrance at the far end of the dining room, a discreet unmarked door that led to the owner's penthouse elevator. Standing in the doorway, framed by the dark polished wood, was a man. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored dark charcoal suit with no tie. His black hair was slightly unruly, and his eyes, a startling, intense gray, were fixed on the scene. He looked less like a restaurateur and more like a wolf that had just been invited into a henhouse. This was Jaden Blackwood, the billionaire owner, the enigma, the man who owned the building, the block, and half the skyline. He never came to the dining room. Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes, who had been looking triumphant, suddenly looked starstruck. Her entire demeanor shifted. The cruel smirk was gone, replaced by erring, flirtatious smile. Jaden, darling, she cooed, standing up and smoothing her red dress. What a surprise. I was just telling Matteo about this dreadful little situation. Jaden Blackwood's gray eyes did not move to Beatrice. They didn't even acknowledge her. They swept past her, past the gaping diners, past the terrified Matteo Rossi. His gaze landed with unnerving, absolute focus on Amelia. He looked at her soaked shirt. He looked at the puddle at her feet. He looked at the defiant, terrified tears in her eyes. And then his eyes dropped to the small dented locket resting against her collarbone. The entire world seemed to stop for him. He took a sharp, audible breath. Beatrice, sensing she was being ignored, tried again. Jaden, this waitress, she completely ruined my evening. She be quiet, Jaden Blackwood said, his voice soft, but with an edge that sliced through her chatter and left her standing with her mouth open. He took a step forward, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the marble. He walked past the stunned diners. He walked past table 7, ignoring Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes as if she were a piece of furniture. He stopped directly in front of Amelia. He was close, so close she could see the faint scar on his jaw, the impossible depth of his gray eyes. He was searching her face, his expression one of dazed, profound disbelief. What? He said, his voice rough. Is your name Amelia? She whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Amelia Vance. Jaden Blackwood closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, as if struck. Vance. He reached out, not to touch her, but to the locket. His finger hovered over the silver V carving. Where did you get this? It was my mother's, Amelia said, confused. It's just an old locket. It's not, he whispered, a strange, frantic energy in his voice. It's the Vance crest. I've been looking for 20 years. I've been looking for this. And then, in front of the silent, scandalized patrons of New York's most elite restaurant, in front of the sputtering Beatrice and the mortified Mateo, Jaden Blackwood did the impossible. He dropped slowly, deliberately, to one knee. He knelt on the marble floor in the puddle of water at the feet of a dripping, humiliated waitress. He bowed his head. "Miss Vance," Jaden Blackwood said, his voice thick with an emotion Amelia couldn't name. "On behalf of my family, please forgive me." The collective gasp that filled the room was so sharp, it seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. Diners who had been pretending not to watch were now standing, craning their necks. Cell phones were discreetly raised, though no one dared to use a flash. A billionaire, a Blackwood, kneeling to a waitress in a puddle of her own humiliation. The scene was incomprehensible. Beatrice Vanderbilt Hayes looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. Her face, moments ago flushed with victory, was now a mask of chalk, white confusion, and dawning horror. "Jaden, what? What is this?" she stammered, her voice a shrill squeak. "It's a joke, right? Get up. You're getting your suit wet. She's a nobody." Jaden Blackwood didn't move. He remained on one knee, his head bowed to Amelia, a posture of supplication so profound it was almost medieval. Amelia herself was frozen in sheer, unadulterated shock. Her mind was a frantic scramble. "This is a dream. I'm asleep in the staff locker room. This is a prank. He's mistaking me for someone else." "Sir," Amelia whispered, her voice shaking so hard she could barely form the word. "Please get up. I don't understand." "What's happening?" Jaden lifted his head. His intense gray eyes were now glistening with an unfathomable emotion. It wasn't pity, it was something deeper. It was recognition. "I am Jaden Blackwood," he said, as if introducing himself for the first time. "My grandfather was Alistair Blackwood." The name meant nothing to Amelia. She just shook her head, water droplets flying from her hair. I'm sorry. Jaden, stop this," Beatrice shrieked, finally finding her footing. She marched over, her diamonds flashing. "You're embarrassing yourself, and you're embarrassing me. Whatever this play is, it's over. Fire her, and let's have a drink." She reached out to grab Jaden's arm to physically pull him up. "Do not," Jaden said, his voice rising to a resonant, terrifying command. "Touch me." He rose to his feet, not in a rush, but with a slow, deliberate power. He turned to face Beatrice. He was several inches taller than her, and as he looked down, all the warmth, all the strange emotion he had shown Amelia vanished. His face was now carved from ice. "You," he said, "threw water on this woman." It wasn't a question. It was a judgment. She was incompetent," Beatrice defended, but her voice was weak. The power in the room had shifted violently and completely. "She was incompetent," Jaden repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "So you, Beatrice Vanderbilt Hayes, wife of Arthur Hayes, a man who I recall sits on 2 of my subsidiary boards, decided to assault her in my restaurant." "It was just water," Beatrice cried. "She's a servant. She's paid to." "She is not a servant," Jaden cut in, his voice ringing with authority. "She is Amelia Vance, and you just made the single greatest mistake of your social and financial life." He turned to his maître. Matteo Rossi looked like he was about to be physically ill. "Matteo," Jaden said. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." "Sir," Matteo stammered. "You were here. You saw this, sir. It was a difficult situation. Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes is a valued guest," Jaden finished for him. "And what did you do, Matteo, when you saw this valued guest assault a member of your staff?" Matteo swallowed. I was attempting to de-escalate, sir." "By firing Miss Vance?" Jaden asked. Matteo's face went white. He had no answer. "You would have thrown away the most important person to ever set foot in this building," Jaden said, his voice filled with a cold disappointment to appease her. He pointed a finger at Beatrice. "Her a woman who finds sport in humiliating people she sees as beneath her. What does that say about your judgment?" Matteo. "Sir, I didn't know." "No, Jaden said you didn't." He turned his back on both of them, a gesture of ultimate dismissal, and faced Amelia again. His expression softened instantly. The king was gone, and the penitent had returned. "Miss Vance, Amelia, I know this is a shock," he said, his voice gentle. He shrugged off his own thousand-suit jacket, a dark, heavy weight of cashmere and silk, and wrapped it around Amelia's soaked, trembling shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled of cedar and something metallic like rain. She clutched it, drowning in the fabric. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why did you, Vance? What does my name mean to you?" Jaden looked at the locket, which now rested against the dark lapel of his jacket. "Your locket," he said. "It bears the crest of the Vance family. My grandfather, he and your great-grandfather. They knew each other." He paused, glancing around the opulent room, at the gold leaf on the ceiling, the plush velvet, the glittering crystal. "This," he said, his voice sweeping across the silent room. "All of this, Leveldor, the Blackwood building it sits in, the Blackwood Holdings Group, it was all built on a partnership." He took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. "It was a partnership between Alistair Blackwood and Thomas Vance, your great-grandfather." A low murmur rippled through the diners. "They built it together," Jaden continued, his voice growing stronger, clearer for everyone to hear. "They were partners, best friends, until my grandfather betrayed him." The restaurant was now a courtroom, and Jaden was a witness for the prosecution. "My grandfather used a legal loophole," Jaden said, his voice roar with a generation's-old shame. "He diluted your great-grandfather's shares, forged documents, and pushed him out. He stole his patents, his stake, his entire fortune. He took everything." He pointed to the floor. "The Vance family was ruined, bankrupted and disgraced. They vanished. The Blackwood family. We built an empire on that theft. We built it on a lie." He looked back at Amelia, his gray eyes burning into hers. "I have spent the last 2 decades," Jaden Blackwood declared, "bound by my father's dying wish, searching for the last heir of Thomas Vance. Someone, too, to make it right." He held his hand out, palm up towards Amelia. "And now here you are working as a waitress in the very building that should have been yours." He locked eyes with Beatrice, whose face was a grotesque mask of disbelief. "You didn't just throw water on a waitress, Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes," Jaden announced, his voice echoing in the vast silent room. "You threw it on the rightful owner of half my fortune." The silence that followed Jaden Blackwood's proclamation was absolute. It was a vacuum, a void so total that Amelia could hear the frantic pounding of her own heart, the drip, drip, drip of water falling from his jacket onto the marble floor. "The rightful owner of half my fortune?" The words hung in the air, nonsensical, ludicrous. Amelia felt a wave of dizziness so profound she gripped the lapels of the heavy jacket to steady herself. This was a mistake, a cruel, elaborate, insane mistake. "No," Amelia whispered, shaking her head. "No, you're wrong. My family, we were from Boston. My father was a mechanic. My mother was a secretary. We don't have a great-grandfather with a fortune. We've always been poor." "Poverty was forced upon you," Jaden said, his voice gentle but firm. "The Vances didn't just lose their money. They lost their name. They were forced into obscurity, hounded by my grandfather's creditors and lawyers until they had to change their identities, move states, and erase their past just to survive. But they kept one thing, the one thing Alistair Blackwood could never find." He tapped the locket, the Vance crest, the proof. Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes finally found her voice. It was a strangled, ugly sound. You're insane. You're telling me this. This child. This owns this building. You're lying. It's a trick." "A trick?" Jaden turned on her, his patience finally shattering. "Do you think I would invent a story that lays bare my family's foundational sin? That confesses to a century of fraud? My lawyers have been sitting on a contingency file for this moment since I took over the company. A file named the Vance Protocol. This restaurant, this building, it's all held in a trust that I have been legally bound to dissolve and reallocate the moment a proven heir of Thomas Vance was identified." He looked at Amelia, his gaze softening again. "The locket was the sign. Your name was the confirmation." "This is impossible," Amelia stammered. She thought of Liam. She thought of the eviction notice she'd hidden from him. If this is true, what does it mean? It means, Jaden said, his voice dropping so only she could hear, that your life as you know it is over. It means you never have to worry about money or medicine or rent again. It means I am in more ways than one at your service. He had knelt before, but this statement of fealty was the true surrender. Now, Jaden said, turning to the room at large, his voice returning to that of a CEO, a commander. He pointed at Beatrice, who was trembling, not with rage, but with genuine primal fear. Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes, you have assaulted a co-owner of this establishment. You have insulted my partner. He seemed to test the word, and it seemed to fit. You and your party will leave now. Jaden, please, Beatrice whimpered, all her arrogance gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading tone. My husband, Arthur, he'll be furious. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Amelia, she turned to Amelia, her eyes wide with a horrifying fake sincerity. I am so sorry. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. Amelia, wrapped in a billionaire's jacket, staring at the woman who had humiliated her, felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. She said nothing. It's too late for that, Beatrice, Jaden said coldly. Your credit line at all Blackwood properties is revoked. Your memberships at the clubs are terminated. And I will be having a long talk with your husband, Arthur, about the wisdom of his board appointments. I suspect he'll find his position untenable. This was the killing blow. He wasn't just kicking her out. He was dismantling her life. You can't, Beatrice shrieked. I can, Jaden said. And I will, Matteo. Matteo Rossi, who had been watching this all unfold like a tennis match, snapped to attention. Sir, have security escort Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes and her friends. Out of the building, not just the restaurant, out onto the street. Yes, Mr. Blackwood, Matteo signaled, and two large men in subtle black suits emerged from the shadows near the entrance. They moved toward the table. Beatrice's friends, who had been silent, scattered from the booth as if it were radioactive. Beatrice, we'll just... They grabbed their purses and fled, leaving Beatrice to face the consequences alone. No, get your hands off me, she screeched as the security guards gently but firmly took her by the arms. You'll regret this. You'll all regret this. I'll sue. Do you know who I am? You are a person, Jaden Blackwood said, his voice echoing in the silent room, who is no longer welcome here. She was marched through the dining room, past the staring silent diners, her red dress twisted, her face a mask of apoplectic rage. The doors of Leewell door closed behind her, and the silence she left in her wake was even more profound. The show was over. Jaden turned, his entire posture slumping slightly, as if the last 10 minutes had cost him years. He looked at the remaining diners, who quickly dropped their gazes back to their plates. My apologies for the disturbance, he announced to the room. Dinner and all drinks for everyone are on the house this evening. Please enjoy the rest of your night. A buzz of excited, disbelieving whispers erupted. He had just comped a room that likely held over $100,000 in tabs. Then he was all business. He turned to Amelia. Are you all right? You're shaking. You're cold. I think I'm in shock, Amelia said, her teeth chattering. Matteo, Jaden called. The metro skewered over, his face still pale. Mr. Blackwood, cancel Miss Vance's shift. Cancel all her future shifts. Have one of the hostesses find her some dry clothes from the staff emergency locker, and then bring her to my penthouse. We have a lot to discuss. Yes, sir. Matteo turned to Amelia. Miss Vance, my apologies. Amelia looked at the man who had been about to fire her to save his own skin. She saw the fear in his eyes, and for the first time in her life, she felt the strange, heavy sensation of power. She just nodded. And Matteo, Jaden added, a dangerous afterthought. Sir, we are going to have a very long talk tomorrow about your definition of de-escalation and about whose side you are truly on. You work for Blackwood Holdings, and Amelia Vance is Blackwood Holdings. Never, ever let me see you forget that again. Yes, sir, Matteo whispered, his head bowed. It will not happen again. No, Jaden agreed. It won't. He turned to Amelia, his voice softening once more. Go get warm. I'll meet you upstairs. We're going to call my lawyers." And then he said, "You're going to tell me all about your brother Liam." Amelia's head snapped up. How, how did you know about Liam?" Jaden gave her a small, sad smile. "The Vance protocol wasn't just about finding you, Amelia. It was about knowing you. I know you work 2 jobs. I know you live in Brooklyn. And I know your brother is on a waiting list at Mount C for a clinical trial." He paused. "The chief administrator of Mount C owes me a favor. A very large one." The tears that Amelia had refused to shed in humiliation now came hot and fast. But they were not tears of anger. They were tears of a pressure valve releasing a weight she had carried for years, suddenly, impossibly lifting. "Go," he said gently. "Your new life starts now." The elevator that led to Jaden Blackwood's penthouse was not like the public ones. It was accessed by a private key, all dark mahogany and brushed bronze, and it moved with a silent, sickening speed. Amelia, now dressed in a simple black t-shirt and trousers from the staff's emergency locker, clutched his suit jacket around her like armor. She was alone with Mateo, who hadn't said a word, his face a grim mask of professionalism. The ding of the elevator arriving was a relief. The doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into Jaden's apartment. If Lido Door was a fortress of status, this was the King's Keep. It was a sprawling 2-story expanse of glass and steel, offering a 360-degree view of the Manhattan skyline. The lights of the city glittered below them like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and bespoke. A single massive abstract painting dominated one wall. Jaden was already there, standing by the floor, tousling windows, a glass of water in his hand. Not for him, for her. "Thank you, Mateo. That will be all for tonight," Jaden said, dismissing him. "Sir, Miss Vance?" Mateo nodded to them both, the inclusion of her name a clear new sign of respect. The elevator doors closed, leaving Amelia alone with the most powerful man she had ever met. "Please," he said, gesturing to a plush gray sofa. "Sit. You must have 1,000 questions." Amelia sat on the edge, the cushions sinking beneath her. "1,000,000, she whispered, looking at the city below. Is it? Is it true? All of it?" "Every word," Jaden said, sitting in an armchair opposite her. He didn't loom. He sat like an equal, his hands clasped between his knees. "My father, Richard Blackwood, discovered the truth when his own father, Alistair, was dying. Alistair confessed everything in a fit of guilt-ridden dementia. The theft, the forgery, the ruin of Thomas Vance. He confessed. Yes, and my father, he was a better man than his. He was horrified. He spent his life trying to quietly amass all the original proof, the letters, the voided contracts, the bank transfers. He created the trust, the Vance protocol, with a single directive. Find the Vance heir and restore what was stolen. He died before he could find you. The task fell to me. You've been looking for me. For anyone with the Vance name and a connection to Thomas, it was like searching for a ghost. Your branch of the family was the most well hidden. You were living under a slightly altered name until your parents passed." "Correct." Amelia nodded, her mind reeling. "My mother, she used to say our family had bad blood with money, that we were cursed. She never explained. She just told me to keep my head down, work hard, and never trust anyone who promised me the world." "She was protecting you," Jaden said softly. "And she was right, too. My grandfather was a monster. What he did," he shook his head. "He didn't just steal a fortune, Amelia. He stole your family's legacy." "The locket," Amelia said, pulling it out from under her shirt. "It was the proof. It was the final piece. My father had a photograph of Thomas Vance, and he was wearing this exact locket. It was his personal seal. We knew the heir, if they existed, might still have it. When I saw it on you, and you said your name, I knew." Amelia stared at the dented piece of silver. Her whole life it had been a simple sentimental object. Now it was a key to a kingdom she never knew existed. "So what? What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "Now?" Jaden said, leaning forward. "We begin the transfer. My lawyers will meet with you tomorrow. We'll need a DNA test, a formality, but the locket and your lineage are proof enough for me. The trust dictates a 50% transfer of all assets held within it. 50%? Amelia squeaked. Of this, she gestured to the skyline. Of Blackwood Holdings, the buildings, the hotel chains, the shipping lines, the tech investments. Conservatively, Amelia, you are now worth approximately $40 billion. Amelia made a small choking sound. She put her head in her hands. $40 billion. She had been worried about an $800 copay. It's too much, she whispered, her voice cracking. I can't. I don't know how to be that. You don't have to, Jaden said, his voice grounding her. You don't have to be anything but Amelia Vance. You won't be running the company tomorrow. I'll still do that. But you will be my partner, my full partner. You will have a seat on the board. You will have a veto. And you will have a life you can't even begin to imagine. He stood up and walked to his desk. But first things first, he picked up his phone. He pressed a single button. Dr. Aris, he said into the phone. Jaden Blackwood. Yes, I'm well. Listen, I'm calling in my marker. The one from the Geneva acquisition. Yes, I have a new patient for you. His name is Liam Vance. He's 16. He's on the waiting list for your autoimmune trial at Mount Si. I need him moved to the top. No, not the top. I need him admitted tonight. Send a private ambulance to this address. Amelia gasped, rattling off her Brooklyn address, her hands over her mouth. You heard her? Jaden said into the phone. Yes, the best suite, the best team, all expenses, all of them are to be routed through my private family office. I don't care what you have to do. Make it happen. He listened for a moment. Thank you, Elias. I'm in your debt. He hung up. He looked at Amelia, whose face was a mask of stunned, streaming tears. They're on their way, Jaden said. An ambulance will be at your apartment in 20 minutes to pick Liam up. They'll take him to the new pediatric immunology wing at Mount Si. Dr. Aris will oversee his case personally. He's the best in the world. Amelia couldn't speak. She just wept. A deep, shuddering sob that came from the very core of her, washing away years of fear, of desperation, of the crushing, solitary weight of responsibility. All her life she had fought to keep her and Liam's heads just above water. And in one night, Jaden Blackwood hadn't just thrown her a life raft, he had given her the entire ocean. Jaden let her cry for a moment, then quietly placed a box of tissues on the table. There's one more thing, he said, his voice hesitant. Amelia looked up, wiping her eyes. What? My father's confession, the files, the Vance protocol, they're all in a vault. He left a letter for the heir for you. I've never read it. It's in the safe. He walked to the massive abstract painting. He pressed a panel on the wall, and the painting hissed, sliding aside to reveal a massive high-security vault door. He entered a code, scanned his thumb, and the heavy door clicked open. He emerged a moment later holding a single yellowed envelope sealed with wax. On the front, in his father's elegant script, was one word, Vance. This, he said, holding it out to her, belongs to you. Amelia, with a trembling hand, took the letter that held the truth of her past and the key to her future. Amelia's fingers traced the wax seal. The letter felt heavy, a physical weight of history. Go on, Jaden said, his voice gentle. Open it. You're safe. She broke the seal. The paper was thick, expensive stationery, yellowed with age. The handwriting inside was elegant, but the pressure of the pen suggested a man writing with great urgency, great pain. To the heir of Thomas Vance, if you are reading this, then my son has succeeded, and I have failed. I have failed to find you in my lifetime. But more than that, my family has failed yours in a way that words cannot mend. I cannot give you back your great-grandfather. I cannot give you back the generations of peace and prosperity that was stolen from your line. I cannot erase the hardship, the fear, and the poverty you have likely endured. The money is a poor substitute. It is a debt, not a gift. What my father Alistair did, he did out of greed and a desperate, knowing insecurity. He stole from his best friend. Thomas Vance was a genius, a visionary. Alistair was a salesman. The Blackwood Empire was built on Thomas's vision and Alistair's crime. This letter is not an apology. An apology is not mine to give. It is a confession and it is a warning. The money will change everything. It will bring you power, but it will also attract those who worship power. People like my father. You will suddenly have many friends. You will suddenly be beautiful, intelligent, and fascinating to everyone you meet. Do not trust it. Trust what you trusted before this day. Trust the instincts that kept you alive. Trust the people you loved when you had nothing. My son Jaden has been raised with this story. He has been raised to know the debt that we owe. He is a good man, but he is a Blackwood. He is intense and he is ruthless. It is my deepest hope that in righting this wrong, he will find his own peace. And that in partnering with you, the Vance vision can finally be joined with the Blackwood engine as it was always meant to be. Use this power. Do not let it use you. With deepest respects, Richard Blackwood. Amelia finished the letter, tears blurring the last few lines. She looked up at Jaden, who was watching her with a painful, searching expression. He was a good man, Amelia whispered, folding the letter. He was a haunted one, Jaden said. He lived his entire life in the shadow of his father's sin. He hoped you would be the one to finally bring the light back. A vibration from Amelia's pocket startled her. It was her cheap, cracked smartphone. A text from Liam. Liam. Where are you? Some guys in suits are here with an ambulance. They say they're taking me to Mount Si. They say Dr. Orris. This is crazy. Are we in trouble? Amelia laughed. A real bubbling laugh that was half sob. She typed a reply with shaking fingers. Amelia, it's okay, Liam. It's not trouble. It's the opposite. Go with them. It's all paid for. I'll explain everything later. I love you. It's all going to be okay. Liam, it's all paid for. Amelia, who did you rob? She laughed again. He's on his way, she said to Jaden, wiping her eyes. Good. Jaden smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his harsh features. Now for you, for me, you can't go back to that apartment. Not tonight, not ever. I have a guest wing here that's larger than your building. My security team will clear out your apartment tomorrow. For now, you stay here. You are the most valuable and suddenly most vulnerable asset Blackwood Holdings has. Vulnerable? Amelia hadn't even thought of that. Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes is a fool, but she is a well-connected fool. The story of what happened tonight will be all over page 6 by morning. Billionaire kneels to Waitress heir. They will paint you as a Cinderella, as a gold digger, as a fraud. We need to get ahead of it. My PR team is already drafting a statement. We will hold a press conference. A press conference? Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. You won't be alone, Jaden said, his hand gesturing to include himself. We will do it together as partners. He offered her his hand. She looked at it, a strong, capable hand that signed checks for billions that had just saved her brother's life. Amelia Vance, the waitress, took his hand and stood up. But it was Amelia Vance, the heirs, who let it go. Thank you, Jaden, she said, her voice clear and steady. The shock was receding, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Thank you for honoring your father's wishes, and for Liam. It's the least I could do, he said. No, Amelia said the least you could do was give me money. You gave me your respect. You knelt. That Jaden said was for my family's honor, not yours. You already had it. A new feeling was rising in her power, not the cruel, brittle power of Beatrice, but a deep foundational power, the kind Richard Blackwood had written about. That woman, Amelia said, her voice turning to ice. Beatrice, you ruined her, didn't you? Jaden nodded. I dismantled her husband's career. Her social standing will be non-existent by noon tomorrow. She will be a pariah. Good, Amelia said, and the single word was harder than steel. She thought of the ice water. She thought of the laughter. And Mateo, the maitre, he'll be dealt with, Jaden said. No, Amelia said. Don't fire him. Jaden looked surprised. He was going to fire you. He chose a bully over his own staff. I know, and you reminded him what his job is. He'll never make that mistake again. He's good at his job when he's not terrified. Let him stay, but let him know he serves at my pleasure too. Jaden stared at her. a slow, impressed smile spreading across his face. Richard was right. You already know how to use it. I've been powerless my whole life, Jaden, Amelia said, walking to the window and looking down at the city that was now incomprehensibly hers. I know exactly what it looks like, and I know what I'll never be. The next morning, Amelia Vance did not walk into Leewald door in a waitress uniform. She walked in at 10:01 a.m., flanked by Jaden Blackwood and two security guards wearing a simple, elegant navy blue dress, her hair pulled back. The restaurant was closed, the staff assembled. Matteo Rossi stood at the front, his face ashen. Amelia addressed them. She told them her story. She told them she would be their new partner. And she told them that the days of the customer is always right were over. The customer is a guest, Amelia said, her voice echoing in the dining room, and they will treat you all with the respect you deserve. This will be a place of excellence, not a playground for bullies. Your dignity is not on the menu. Am I clear? A yes, Miss Vance, came from the staff. She looked at Matteo. Mr. Rossi, you will remain in your position, but you report to me now. Yes, Miss Vance, he said, his voice thick with relief and a new profound respect. It is an honor. The final scene of that chapter was not in the restaurant. It was 2 weeks later. Amelia, looking rested and healthy, walked into the main boardroom of Blackwood Holdings. The room was filled with stony-faced board members, all men, all older than her. They had been summoned for an emergency meeting. They all stood as she entered. Jaden Blackwood was at the head of the table, but he wasn't sitting. He was standing by the chair, and as Amelia approached, he pulled it out for her. Amelia Vance, the girl who used to carry silver trays, sat down at the head of the table. Gentlemen, she said, opening her new leather-bound portfolio. Let's begin. In an instant, Amelia Vance's life was rewritten. But the real story isn't about the money. It's about the poison of arrogance and the power of hidden legacies. Beatrix Vanderbilt Hayes, who saw people as objects, became an object of pity herself, shunned, divorced, and irrelevant. Her cruelty cost her everything. And Amelia, she didn't just get rich. She got justice. She used her newfound power not for revenge, but for transformation. She revolutionized the working conditions at all Blackwood properties and established the Liam Vance Foundation for families bankrupted by medical debt. She proved that true power isn't about making others kneel. It's about having the strength to stand up, not just for yourself, but for everyone who has ever been made to feel small. The rich woman threw the water, but Amelia, with her quiet dignity, commanded the storm. What did you think of Amelia's story? Have you ever seen someone with power get a taste of their own medicine? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story of karma and vindication, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to see that good things do happen to good people. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story.